making new choices. Hi, thanks for being here on time.
I didn't want you to be alone.
Thank you, very nice of you. Yes, so we had great keynotes earlier today and yesterday, and I think there is a lot to elaborate on what we've heard. And today we know that all businesses want to innovate in as an incremental or disruptive way, but they face a lot of challenges along the way because a lot of big businesses, they are not free. Hi, welcome. They're not free to do what they really want to because they have KPIs to meet. They sometimes lack expertise or mindset of the startup. At the same time, there are startups who are like constantly working on looking for solutions for some problems, taking risk, and basically doing the opposite thing the big business does, staying on the familiar territory, right? So having startups working on these new ideas and having big business that can give these ideas scale, this looks like a perfect match for cooperation, and this is something we are going to discuss today. But before that, I would really appreciate if you could share the experience you have in the topic of our panel, like, I don't know, like share a little bit with us what you do, and maybe do some intros in terms of the projects you did for startups or companies to connect them.
Sure, I'm Mike Bott. I work for a venture capital firm now, but I'm a marketer by training. Worked at Procter & Gamble. I've worked at startups like Chemistry.com. AOL wasn't quite a startup at the time, but it was in the tech space. And then I ran one of the top startup accelerators in the US called the Brandery. So I've had a lot of work being the recipient of startup pitches and then helping startups also get pilots and work effectively with big companies.
Well, thank you.
So I'm Jan Kennedy. There's two things, I guess, that I'm involved in. As I said yesterday, one is the Founder Institute. So it's an early stage startup accelerator program where the goal is essentially to globalize Silicon Valley. So they set up these programs all around the world, and it's to do with teaching early stage founders what founders need to know before they go and make a ton of mistakes. So that's on the startup side. And then I run the Academy for Corporate Entrepreneurship, where we are essentially tap into a network of mentors that are skilled in teaching startup methodologies and practices, as well as understanding the world of corporate innovation. So trying to get internal employees to be more innovative and also provide opportunities then to collaborate with startups for the purposes that we're discussing.
So I believe you engage mentors from big business to help like entrepreneurs and startups to better understand how big business works and the industries.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
And I'm Thibaut Rouquette, originally from France, currently living in London, nationality European. I started to work on the topic of collaboration between startups and corporations early on. Firstly, back in university, organizing startup weekends where in south of France we're gathering the main actor of both the corporations and the startups to work all together during a weekend. And then I've been on both the corporate and the startup side, so developing the network of startups for the Global Innovation Management team of Deutsche Bank in Germany. And currently I'm focusing and working with two companies. One is called Startup Bootcamp. So we are a global accelerator and I'm part of the FinTech program. So the idea is we select 10 startups globally in the financial technology space, bring them to London and work intensively with them on a 3-month program and connecting them with corporates because we have a lot of corporate partners to have projects all together. And at the same time, I'm working for a sister company that is called Venturescout, and where we have a different approach, which is kind of the opposite, where we turn corporates into entrepreneurs. So one of the last projects that I was leading and that I co-designed was called the Pop Lab and was run for one of the major bank and insurance in the UK, where we gathered together 6 people who didn't know each other and basically turned them into entrepreneurs on a 6-week program. So they went through like all the methodology to kind of become entrepreneurs, and the end goal was to discover a market they didn't know and to come out with innovative ideas that they presented to their top management to turn them into pilots.
Hi, I'm Tudor. I was a lawyer and then I converted to entrepreneurship, and right now I'm helping corporations build their own innovation programs.
That was short.
Hi, I'm Stefano Virgilli, Italian by birth. I look Italian, I speak like an Italian. I spent... it's not a joke being Italian, no? What's going on? What is going on? I did my first invoice when I was 16, and now I'm 37, so I'm being around 21 years now. I spent most of my professional life in outside Italy, actually. I spent 6 years in Singapore. Now I work in Middle East, in the Sultanate of Oman, near Dubai. And I'm here trying to find technology to bring to the Middle East. Yeah, just one quote. Yesterday I heard someone saying that the money is in the US and the people is in Asia. And I say, no, the money is in Middle East. Just come to Middle East.
Well, thank you. So even today and yesterday we've seen a lot of examples of the cooperation already. But before we discuss like how you can cooperate, and maybe we should start with the conversation why companies do it. And like we've heard some keynote speeches on that too. And now you can see that this is like turning into a trend. You have to be really lazy not to run a corporate accelerator, right? Everyone is like doing this, and there are a lot of critics on this saying that this is like a shortcut, you should not do it if you're not ready from the within, you don't have an innovation system set up, so probably you will end up with poor results, not like having value for yourself and not providing value for startups. So let's just have a discussion on what you think about why companies do this, what they lack, what startups have, and what is like a broader picture to look at it, because startup cooperation of large companies is just one part of the innovation process that companies are going through. So yes, share your opinion.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that companies are starting to build accelerators themselves, and I think it's the wrong approach. I actually think the Start Bootcamp approach is much more effective, where a number of like-minded companies come together and kind of push together. Because if you think about it, if you have, let's say, 6 to 10 startups come through a program, it doesn't make sense for every company to support 6 to 10 startups, 8 startups, whatever, with pilots. Because they're going to approach things in a different way maybe than a company does, and you don't want to change the startup fundamentally in a way just to work with one big corporation. So I think if you can get a number of big corporate players that have similar problems that need to be solved, it's probably better for the long-term viability of that startup as well. So it's kind of an interesting place to be. Now I see, there's some interesting things like the Disney Accelerator, for example. I think sometimes those work if the startups are much further along and the value they're going to receive is very specific, but for the most part I think it's really tough to say, hey, startup, you need this help, you're very early on, you're fragile, and let's plug you in with a big company that has no idea how to do this, and this is kind of their sandbox. It doesn't make sense. There's too much to lose for the startup and potentially not enough gain for the individual corporate partner.
So you're an advocate for coalition programs, so
Absolutely.
It makes sense because this way like startup can get more, and then the price like every company has to pay is smaller, and it's good like just to try and see if this works for you and learn from this experience. So
that's right. And as a startup, would you rather have 3 big customers or 1? You're putting a lot of eggs in one basket if you just hope that this one's going to work out.
Who supports this?
So on the why, thank you for the validation of the model. On the why, from experience, what we've seen is that most of the corporation coming to us, what they want to get out of setting up such accelerator is a change of the culture. Because what we see is most of the corporation are still run like they used to be 50 years ago, and it's not working anymore. So when the corporates are coming to us, they want to learn. They want to learn from the startups. They want to learn how to be more lean, more agile, and see what's happening and bring this methodology and this way of working and this motivation back to their corporation. And second motivation that we've seen is more related to the corporate venturing. And in this case, this is more about like discovering the market, getting info on what's happening on a specific vertical, and then potentially just preparing a deal flow for the future. On what you mentioned, so the lack of cooperation, so this is speed of execution that they want to get from the startups and culture. And you mentioned also like the criticism that we see about accelerators, corporations trying to set up accelerators. And I agree with what you just said before, in the sense that I'm part of the people also criticizing, doing critiques about this model, because I've seen a list, like no later than last week, of hundreds of corporate accelerators. And the problem is, most of these accelerators, people running them, have no idea how to do it. So this is a big mistake, because this is not good for the corporation and the organization, because you're just going to waste a lot of money. And this is not good for the startups, because if you don't have the right skill set of people, the right knowledge, and the right support, you will not bring value to the startups. So if you corporate decision maker and you're actually looking at eventually set up an accelerator, please either hire like the people who know about it and give them the freedom to do whatever they have to do, or work with big partners such as Techstars, such as Startup Bootcamp, or any of the big names who know what they're doing, because we've been doing it for years.
So basically, like running a corporate accelerator is not the best choice of like getting introduced to the topic and learn from this. You have to start with something else, right? Or no?
Yes. Never start with an accelerator. From also what we've seen, it depends on the motivation. Like you have to, the first question, and this is a good one you ask, if you a corporate and you want to set up an accelerator, this is not what, this is not how, this is why. Why do you want to do it? What do you want to get out of it? So what we've also seen that is working quite well, if you want to have this introduction to culture of innovation startups, start with hackathons. Have a couple of them. Just bring your employees together and for 2 or 3 days working on trying to solve problems. Do it once, twice, 3 times, then start to bring external people into the hackathons. And then once you're ready, once you have some solid knowledge, then you can go to something that is, let's say, a bigger, longer acceleration program that you can run, or accelerator.
Thank you.
I totally agree with this perspective, and if you look on a broader perspective, basically corporations were always innovative, but 2 decades ago this innovation came from inside because they were basically hiring people doing innovation. In the last couple of decades, software started eating the world, and you have all these software and startup methodologies. And basically the cost of launching a new product changed from, I don't know, something like $500,000 to $5,000. And now these corporations find out that those who were supposed to innovate are outside. And accelerators or all these models they are trying to copy are basically just means for them to understand what is the right context to bring back innovation. So I think it's still a struggle, and we'll see a lot of development in this area in the next probably decade. But once the corporations start to wise up and actually embrace startup methodologies, there will be a big change in this field.
So you suggest like not starting even with hackathons, but starting with educating the employees on lean design thinking, creating an innovation team, and then only do some external kind of activities, right?
I don't know, it should be tested. It's just a hypothesis.
Yeah, we use some approaches from the startup world ourselves, right? Okay, do you want to add something?
The scenario that I've seen in Middle East with a large organization, and the country where I am is actually the entire private economy is handled by approximately 7 families that have large corporations. Then there are some government hybrid large organization. Mostly when they go into startup collaboration or cooperation, these are CSR funds. So to play the devil's advocate, I would say, if you look really into the motivation why they are doing it, sometimes it looks like it's a facade, so that the next day they can be on the newspaper and say, yeah, we helped some startups, and it's not really adding any value, because probably they don't know what value they need.
Well, thank you for raising this topic. I think this is something we can discuss because what are the reasons behind companies doing this? From what I see, it's mostly like PR or reputation or social responsibility, things that people, that's why they do some kind of, they want to be perceived as innovative companies, also for employer branding and things like this. Do you think these are the right motives for doing innovation? I mean, probably it's not about investing into disruptive innovation and, I don't know, following the McKinsey Three Horizons model or something. It's different motives. It's just companies want to be perceived as innovative and they just join the movement. But, well, maybe this is not the right reason, but at the same time, they are not like hurting anyone by doing this and they're learning along the way. And maybe at some point they will get a better idea why they would do this. So if you want to add on this.
So yeah, I agree. A lot of corporate incubators are popping up because of image-related reasons, but maybe we could argue that's okay in the beginning. Does that make this company more innovative? Probably not in the beginning.
It's a bit like a fake, right? Like fake kind of activity.
Well, I think it's a learning curve. It's where they're starting, and then they're figuring out, okay, what type of startup should we be looking to attract? You know, I've mentored at and sat in on the demo days of Wyra from Telefonica, and one of their criteria is how does this startup fit into our strategy? How would we help them execute? Right? What are they going to give the Telefonica business? Can we be their channel? And often that's the key question. There could be great, amazing startups, but they have to go with the one that they can help introduce into the market. Otherwise, you don't have that synergetic relationship. So I think on a very high level, they're doing it because they've realized they need to innovate. They've lost their innovation mojo. And collaborating with startups is a way of learning how to get that innovation mojo back. And to the point someone made is they were startups themselves one day. So they used to know how to do this. And it's just about regaining some of that knowledge. And I think what's happened is the default is we've gone from idea and jumping into let's have an incubator because that will make us innovative. And then I totally agree that the incubator is not necessarily the solution. Often because it's not executed in the right way. It's not run by people that know how to find product market fit. And ideas are being pushed into that incubator often too prematurely, right? They're missing this discovery phase of finding problem solution fit, so really testing, is there actually a commercializable business model that can be put into that incubator? So yeah, to summarize, sometimes for image purposes, but I would say let's not judge that too quickly because it might be the first step. And especially with Wyra, I've seen them go stronger and stronger and stronger every year. So they're doing a better and better job. And for you guys who are running startups, those types of incubators are very important for the ecosystem. So I'm from Munich, and Wyra is the main supporter of the startup ecosystem. So they provide event space, they host all the meetups. So they're a real, influencer that help everyone move forward.
Well, if you talk about the evolution, I think one example fits well is like Unilever. I think the first things they did was the accelerator by Techstars. And then they evolved into creating the Unilever Foundry, and they have a whole set of things they can do with startups on ongoing basis. So it's not project based, but they are open to cooperate with them in different ways. And actually, this is something I would like us to discuss for the next few minutes, is the ways you can cooperate, because we touched a few points why companies would do it, and we also mentioned a few things companies can do, like creating an incubator or run an accelerator program by themselves or with a partner, or, I don't know, you have hackathons that we also discussed, maybe buying a startup, investing in the startup, or having entrepreneurs in residence programs. So you have many, many ways of cooperating. what is your idea, like at what stage of a startup can benefit most from which way of cooperation? Like, let's say for early stage startup, what is the best way to start cooperating with large businesses? Is it by, probably I would say entrepreneurs in residence maybe, just to hang around and see and learn how the big business operates, and or maybe not.
I think one of the most interesting approaches I've seen is big companies almost doing a request for a proposal, saying, here's a problem I have, who has a solution? And it's just open, as opposed to kind of force-fitting startups that seem to fit with a company that might have a problem that's similar to what they're offering.
Open innovation.
Yeah, open innovation approach is I think, a better way to go about really making sure there's a good fit, because a lot of times a big corporation can ruin a startup very quickly by some of the things I mentioned before, forcing them into their model or into their culture, into their processes. And a lot of times, I believe a lot of this, corporate acceleration and things like that are happening because companies really do want to be innovative. They see that a startup can change something within a week, whereas it takes them a year and a half to launch a product as a big company. So I think that the intentions are probably more pure than some things. There's definitely the window dressing, we want the publicity that comes out of it. But those are, I would hopefully think, are more tangential benefits. But I think the best approach I've seen is a company saying, hey, we're looking for any startup that can solve this problem, and there's a real business reason for the problem. I think one of the things I always tell startups is understand what the 3 biggest issues this big company is facing. And if you're not solving one of those, don't waste your time. Like, come back in a year when they care about whatever it is you bring to the table.
Thank you. Does anyone have anything else to add? Okay, let me remind, the question was on the formats of cooperation, like hackathons and accelerators, incubators. Yep.
So it's really the $1 million question, because I think there's 100 different answers to this. And we were touching on this outside just now, and it's a point that we really want to get across. I think it very much depends on you, the entrepreneur. How do you want to run your business? Right? What is your goal? Are you looking for a channel? Are you looking for a first customer? Are you looking for an exit? Right? Or at the Founder Institute, we really are encouraging people to create long-lasting, enduring, meaningful companies. So we're actually almost promoting that we don't want you to flip your startup. We do not want you to sell it. So the question really is, what do you want to achieve at the different stages you are in the development of your startup? So you might still be very much in the ideation phase and deciding, where should I go? And then a collaboration with corporates might make sense to figure out what are the needs out there, the gaps that you can fill. But if you're in a more mature stage, you're already getting sales maybe you have revenue, and now you're just looking for a way of how can I boost or gain more market presence, or how can I enter a new market? Maybe it's a strategy you're using to go into another country. So you come up with a collaboration with a corporate that helps you gain market access. So I think it's important to consider how you want to run your business and what is it you're achieving.
I will move the conversation a bit further, and I say one of the best outcomes out of an innovation program, corporate innovation program for a startup, is gaining a client, a potential client, but with a certain specific profile, an innovator, somebody that is interested in the product, takes the chance with a product that is early in the beginning and wants to give feedback and support to actually build that product in a manner that is most suitable for them or for their industry.
Thanks. Well, actually, like when I listen to the conversation we have, and probably like the rest of us in this audience, that you have too many answers to the question, it depends, right? Like, oh, well, you have to test and see what happens. So I believe this is one of the biggest problem of this new like innovation movement, because like I have communications background, I have public relations background, and this was and is the main problem for our profession is like it's hard to measure what exactly a company gets when it invests in public relations. Companies do reputation audits and stuff, but still it's not like really clear. And that's why PR people are not perceived as like of strategic importance to the company. So I believe this is something similar that we see in terms of running innovation programs. So the next thing I would like us to like discuss is how do you like set up the process inside the company? Do you need a chief innovation officer, or who should be responsible for this? Well, who should be the contact person a startup should try to connect? We see in the US, like there are companies that have this chief innovation officers, and in the UK, I believe, but in this part of the world, we still don't have it. So sometimes it would be chief marketing officer, or someone like this. And the second question is in terms of measurement, how you measure, how you allocate budgets, and what arguments do you use if you want to sell in the idea to the CEO or the owner of the company? This is a hard question, I believe, yeah.
Well, let's talk about who you go to first, because you have to start with someone to talk to, and then you can figure out the numbers and things like that. I'm a big proponent of finding advocacy at the bottom level, so whoever's going to really execute, and at the top level, the person who has the budget to allocate. You kind of need that combination approach. It's funny because last week I was talking to one of the companies that went through my accelerator, and he said, Mike, I figured it out. The chief innovation officer is where startups go to die. Like, we're not going to spend any more of our time doing that because it's not really in mainstream business. Now, I don't know if that's always the case, but it was an interesting thought that this siloed thing that probably gets some percentage of budget to make the company more innovative, but they're not really in the main flow of the business. They're not, shipping cases or whatever analogy you want to use. So I'm a big proponent of finding someone, a sponsor who's got the budget, and then the person to execute in the same organization, because that's going to give your startup the best chance of success. It's going to make sure it doesn't just end up getting swept under the rug and forgotten about.
Thanks.
At the end of the day, probably the corporation has to buy this innovation, but it's a strategic acquisition. So just like you said, you need at least probably 3 roles really involved in this acquisition. So of course, you have the guy with the budget. He's the only one that can say yes to it. You have the technical guy, the one that has to manage that innovation after it gets in. And that's the guy that can say no. And you have the users, those people that will use day-to-day something new, and they have to be on board if you want a real adoption in the corporation.
To add, but like what has been said before, I believe that if you want to run an innovation program, you also have to forget about chief innovation officer or intern or whatever the title, because this is often the problem. This is what we've seen facing corporations too. In the last program I was mentioning in the introduction, some of the guys spent 25 years in the corporation in some specific division, and it was super hard for them to make them understand that no, they were going to work at the top management level and that they were free to do whatever they wanted. So when you're selling and when you're setting up the program, I completely agree that you need to have like the top management, the people with the budget are going to give it. You need to have the people that are going to execute it, the external people, and you need to bring all of them together in a room and discuss openly. And like if the external person or the facilitator need to really explain that during the innovation program, there is no title anymore, there is no hierarchy anymore, and this is the way it's going to be run. And I believe that if you have this combination of all the different people, the kind of pre-education before running the program, this is some key elements that you will need to have a successful innovation program after.
Well, I also find some similarities, as I did with PR, now with digital marketing or interactive marketing, because companies, when they started to explore the opportunities with practice in digital, they also were looking for ways who owns this digital within the company, yes, because it's both, it works well for PR, for HR, for marketing, but still you need like one person who is in charge of all the digital inventory company creates. So with this argument, do you still agree there is no need for one person in charge of the innovation processes?
Oh, you still have, because you have different roles, right? You have the owner, like let's say the owner of the program, and this is true that you need this person that will be in charge of coordinating, but you need to make sure that even though this is like the coordinator, and each programs that we've been making, we always had some kind of team leader, program leader, and owners that were just like running things and making things moving forward. But I believe that what is important is really kind of in the mindset of how you're going to operate it. And to kind of forget of this title, what we've been often doing is, so you had the owner and let's say like the program leader, and we always had discussion at the very beginning to say that the role of the project leader is to make sure to coordinate, to discuss openly if there is any conflicts that you need to solve, and to have this role of almost like a mom, but at the same time to understand that the kids can be unhappy and that you need to understand why, and make sure that the title will not play any difference in the way you're going to run the program.
Well, I see everyone avoids the part of the question that had to do with measurement. And how do you argue for getting a budget? For example, if you run an accelerator, how do you measure the success of the investment you made into this accelerator? Any ideas?
So that's a really difficult question, because you also have theories out there as should we measure innovation or not? And you have like different research being made on like some agreeing and others saying like we shouldn't measure innovation. But for the budget itself, like in a utopic world, you don't have any budget. You just spend the money that is needed to make things happening and to make things moving, because at the end of the day, the innovation is supposed to bring you on the long-term strategy to improve like your P&L and your bottom line. And this is why we're discussing more and more also like of strategic management of innovation, where strategy and innovation are really linked. So how do we measure? It depends again on what kind of programs we have. On our side, the way that we've been doing it is really, as we have different corporates, they had different kind of needs and objectives by sponsoring the accelerator or investing in the accelerator. And the way you measure it is, if in terms of information and change culture is, how much did it change in your organization? So this is not rocket science, but when you see that a group, and I'm thinking about one of the banks sponsoring us, like within a year and a half, their group, digital group, just grew so much, and they've been so involved into like both the accelerator and having other internal programs and doing so many things. And this is success because the entire bank is now looking at them as a department that is making the most impact in the bank. So this is the way you can, I believe, like measure this.
I think it's more of an argument that you can't afford to not try some things out. An example I have, when I was at Procter & Gamble, one of the projects we were working on, and this is 5-6 years ago, was a social selling platform, basically the ability to buy products through Facebook. And there were 12 P&G brands that were working together on this. We each were taxed $100,000, so it was a $1.2 million project that an outsourced agency was going to build this platform for us. Well, right down the street at the brandery, I didn't even know about the brandery at the time, the accelerator in town. There was an early stage startup working on a social gifting platform that they would have done a pilot for $25,000. And at the end of the day, like both the company, it raised a bunch of money and then ended up failing, and obviously the initiative within P&G failed. But you can't afford to continually drop $1 million to test out an idea. You need to find more cost-effective ways to do it. Maybe some of them will work, maybe some of them won't, but would you rather try 40 initiatives with your $1 million, or would you rather try one? And I think that's the mindset you need to get through, is it's okay to fail, let's just make it not really, really expensive to fail. Now on the flip side, when it comes to measurement, the startup is the one that's responsible for understanding what success looks like, because this could be their shot. If the startup isn't going into a pilot or an engagement with a big company, knowing what they need to get out of it from a white paper perspective, from a return on investment perspective, then they're not doing their job. So I always say it's a startup's responsibility to tell the big company at the end of the 3-month pilot, which is just a drop in the bucket in their budget, that it was successful and why they need to continue doing it. So kind of flip the page a little bit.
Yeah, I can try and add to that and maybe zoom in on a metric that I think is important or will be looked at by corporates when doing these initiatives. Is probably speed to market or speed to revenue. So when Intuit started launching their innovation catalyst programs, and this is internal, okay, so arguably even harder because you're not really starting with entrepreneurs who are experienced, but they went on this mission to launch 100 corporate startups within 100 days, okay? So they came up with a very quick training program that could be delivered within 3 days to get these teams up and running. And the impact that had was, I think they managed to train actually 82 teams, and these teams were allowed to adapt existing business models, launch new products or new services, make iterations to existing ones as well. And the impact with 9 months afterwards, where these employees were allowed to spend 15% of their time pursuing the project still, was actually almost $100 million. New revenue to the company that they otherwise wouldn't have achieved. So minimal amount of time, arguably, an upfront investment, but $100 million roughly came out of it at the end, plus the increased level of employee engagement, right, which HR is like, hey, thumbs up, well done, plus the customer satisfaction, so those ratings went up as well. And another overall example of Intuit just using more of these lean startup tactics was that time to market became quicker, or building new business units. So I think before using lean startup, this is actually a story from Eric Ries's lean startup book. It took 5.5 years to create a $50 million business, for a new product to reach $50 million. After applying lean startup, etc., I think they got it down to 18 months. Or they were doing that within that time frame. And then multiple times. Yeah, so I think that's a key metric that will be looked at.
So talking still, it's like still experiments, right, the company is doing. Do you agree that these experiments are more affordable to like headquarters or companies like in the US, when these like budgets that they allocate to these experiments are like tiny based, like if you compare to all the marketing budgets or R&D budgets they are spending in real life? So what is it for like local companies, like let's say a local Slovenian company or local Ukrainian company, what they should do? Because what I see, all these like projects are still about like multinational companies. And do you agree that the local like leaders in the industries, they are like catching up, or they are still not paying attention to this, or are they?
So I think it's peanuts, right, that's actually needed. And this is part of the problem with incubation. Incubation is about building product, and that's what requires money. But to test ideas and test if there's a market there doesn't really need any money, right? We work with founders all the time that are testing their new businesses. They don't spend any money. The investment is time. So we always say to corporates, you need to come up with a mechanism that allows people to spend time doing the right thing. If you then prove there's potential in this idea and you can validate that, then you go and get small budget to start building out product and prototypes. But before that stage, actually money isn't really an issue. It's winning the time of people. So I don't know how you put that into a system for startups. Again, this very much depends on the stage that you're at. If you're making the collaboration all about, well, we have to build this product, we have to build this prototype, then of course some money is needed. But in relation to the potential ROI, I think it's really minimal. It's peanuts.
Yeah, I completely agree on this, and especially like for big corporations, this is, as you said, peanuts. This is super cheap to have programs like this compared to the million that they spend in some program going nowhere, or some division or some product that are not even being sold. Or So this is the thing. And in terms of like the local versus international, so fortunately we see more and more like headquarters also allocating budget for the branches in the different countries across the world to have such programs. But it's true for local companies, so the ones that are made in Slovenia, made in the UK, made in France, and that didn't go across border. Unfortunately, we don't see it yet. It's still super early. And I believe the reason is simply because the companies are not aware about this. Because when you've been focused on one single market for a long time, doing the same thing, well, you're not even aware that you have such innovation programs. You're not even aware about accelerators. And this is why you have somehow a threat for all these companies are not eventually like catching up. So this is why eventually like my advice for startups and entrepreneurs who want to build growing companies or eventually like a big companies in the future, spend your time early on to travel, to discover ecosystems, to discover like the other startups and to discover what's happening in the world. Because you have so many disruption happening everywhere that you wouldn't expect. Believe me, we've been with Startup Bootcamp traveling all around the world. And at some point, we just arrived in some countries where we saw some innovation that we would have never thought about. So really, early on, if you're an entrepreneur and if you want to start up your business right now, have this global mindset and be open to all the ecosystem and get this knowledge first before like building your business to avoid to do like the same mistake that the last generation made. Not because this is their fault, but because like the world was not connected as it is connected to nowadays. And then missing this opportunity to remain innovative and to remain competitive on your market.
I book my slot.
Here you go.
I've been quiet for half an hour, although an Italian is never quiet as long as can move the hands. No? If you want to shut up an Italian, put him in handcuffs. No, that's the whole joke. I want to emphasize on one aspect of the presentation, of the title itself, established companies. And I think for many startups can be quite intimidating to just jump from startup to major corporate. There is so much more in between, which are decently sized organizations that needs a solution right away. In Singapore, we set up a training center. It was the second largest training center in the country. We grew very fast in 3 years, and now here we have a problem. The problem is that we have too many clients that want to sign up for our courses, and we didn't do enough set up basically to accommodate all the requests, and the enrollment doesn't happen smoothly enough. So we have the solution. We have to find a solution for this problem. And we actually we met 2 startups. It didn't go. It didn't fly. Why? Because first of all, they hate each other. I found that startups, somehow they tend to be very litigious. They have this dog-eat-dog type of mindset. So if a startup gets the business, the other one doesn't get it, and they start trying to backstab each other. And that was one of the things that actually put me off on engaging startup. The second thing was that they just didn't know the industry. They know the technology, they just don't know the industry. They don't know how our client thinks, they don't know what the client wants. And they come in and say, here's the solution for you. And they just lack those 10 years of experience in training, and that didn't fly at all. So eventually what we went for was to hire a person to develop what we have brought forward. And what you were saying just now about the users being involved in this process. We had 16 full-time staff, 27 associate trainers. We put together our trainers. We asked them, what do you want how do you expect it to work? And then we got one guy that actually fulfilled their request. So we cannot delegate to a startup the idea of fixing a problem of what we are doing on a daily basis. It ended up that actually what we have done was very well digested by the customer. Measurement of the performance, we went down from enrolling a person in 35 minutes to 7 minutes. So we were doing things much more efficiently. And at the same time, the government took notice of what we were doing. The government has encouraged us to move it. Actually, they paid back what we have done because we employed locals, and the government wants us to employ locals. It was win-win-win-win. The customer is happy because everything is faster. For us, it didn't cost anything because the government helped us after we have developed it. Some people got a job in a company, and everything was happy.
Well, win-win is something we're looking for, right?
I want to dig a little bit deeper in this field, and one of the probably biggest challenges for a startup is most of the startups are B2Cs and are very, at least the ones that have a chance, are very good at customer development, but B2C customer development. B2B customer development is a whole different animal, and it takes a whole different set of skills to do that. And so it's not only the corporation that has challenges, whether it's incremental innovation and you can measure it very easy, or it's disruptive innovation is just like searching for signs of life on another planet. But it's for the startup a really big challenge to actually get into the corporate mindset and understand how to look for problems, for the real problems, how to touch the place and find out where it hurts.
Yeah, I thank you for touching the B2B and B2C startups difference, because yesterday we heard this, that you don't need investors, you need customers. So for example, for B2C startups, what are the ways to get, is cooperation with established companies a way to get finance for developing and scaling the startup? I don't know, by selling white label technology or things like this? Or you believe that established companies have, of course, more value for B2B startups, being the customers they want to work with? If you want to share this.
So yeah, of course, if you B2B startups, go for key partnerships with big players, and this is really key and will help you to move forward. If you're a B2C startup, then you have two options. The first one is you're going to go on a market which will be different of another corporation or established company, and maybe you can partner, because you can partner for marketing purpose, you can partner for distribution channel purpose, you can partner for plenty of different things. On the other hand, if you're a startup going on the B2C market, competing directly for the same customers, well, don't collaborate. The idea is more to see the corporation, go on the market, get the market shares, and eventually, at the end of the day, buy the corporation. Uber didn't cooperate with the taxi drivers. Airbnb didn't cooperate with the hotel. At the end, maybe they will buy the main hotel chain in the world. And an example that I love, because I'm living in London, is TransferWise. I don't know if you've heard about TransferWise, but just go and check their marketing campaign. The guys were not really nice to the banks. They just said, and you had in the tube station in London, big ad just saying some F-word banks. It was really nasty, because at the end of the day, what they're doing is they competing on the same market, and as a B2C startup, there is no kind of place for collaboration. And from all the different places that we've been, this is somehow that we've seen that is quite different in between, for example, Europe and Silicon Valley when it comes to consumer-facing businesses. Often in Europe, when we're trying to do a B2C startup, we're trying to go on a market where we're not going to compete directly with someone else. In the Silicon Valley, it's often really different. It's just, I'm going to wipe you out. I'm going to make you disappear, and eventually I will buy your stuff. And this is why we see so many disruptions actually coming from there, and not quite likely still in Europe. So this is my advice. B2B, go for it. B2C, think about it. But B2C on the same market, just have in mind that you're going to buy the corporation one day.
Wow. Great optimistic speech. Yeah, I think everyone got inspired and is already ready to buy some corporations of evil. You want to add something, right?
Yeah, a few words on how to get funds, and also the reason why I'm very excited to be here. After 9 years I didn't come to Europe, and I found a very vibrant environment. As I mentioned to some people in the audience, and I've already met some of the startups, in Middle East there is need for technology now. There are a lot of money, a lot of government money for technology, and technology just is not there, and they don't have the idea of what to do. And I went through the catalog of the exhibition. I already met a few of them, great ideas. And I say, if you want to quickly have some finance for your project, you have a good idea, and you are able to make a proof of concept in no time. Time is crucial. And you want to get it paid, you don't necessarily have to go for an investor. You can just go to the Middle East and propose the innovation to one of the public authorities or one of the government bodies, and they will buy from you the service for the proof of concept. Just last 6 months, I've seen at least 3 or 4 opportunities that I had to miss because I didn't have a startup ready. So if you want to meet me after 12:30, I'll be very happy if you have any technology that you want to bring to the Middle East. We can talk about what are the case studies, what do they need there, and then you don't have to give away your equities. You can still own your own startup, and you just have your first client even before, and your first money even before you go into the next stage.
Cool. Yeah, we have like 10 minutes left. Maybe talk more about startups, because I think we discussed more from the company side, how you should approach it, what benefits you get, and things like this. So since we have a lot of startups in this room, maybe let's share some advice. What expectations should startups have? Because I keep hearing from startups that they hate the experience they have with big companies. And it was also mentioned that startups, they have not enough skills to approach big business and pitch ideas to get customers. So maybe some advice from you on expectations and some practical advice how to win in this game that can last like for 1 year with pitching one established company actually.
Well, just to know that the most valuable thing, and this has been touched on a little bit, for the big company is their time. So if you can maximize the impact on every touch point, because they're probably not going to respond to your email in a timely manner. I mean, they're definitely not going to respond to your email in a timely manner. They're not going to get back to you when you need a quick turnaround. So just be very organized. Spend more time than you would normally putting together agendas for the meetings and understanding your objective, what I need to get out of this meeting, and be very upfront about it, because that's how big corporate environments work. It's very objective oriented, it's very structured, and so you almost need to be a chameleon and kind of morph into what they wouldn't expect from you, right? That's how you're going to get the most out of those touch points, because if they meet, you know, I've seen this so many times, and a big company will meet with a startup and it's just not going anywhere, then it becomes deprioritized and it just dies on the vine. So just do more as it relates to planning and setting agendas and objectives, and give them the timeline. Push them. I mean, we talked about how slow things move.
Give them 90 days, or then say, I'm going to be out of the business in 90 days, so if you don't do a project with me, there is no one to do a project with.
That's right. Yeah, be very clear. Like, all right, in 10 days we're going to launch. They've never launched anything in 10 days. Like, the next meeting is in 10 days for them. So just remember that you're working with the slowest moving folks, and the reason they're meeting with you is because they want to figure out how to move faster. It's just not in their culture to move fast.
Cool.
So I think that's really good, but to make that happen, it's probably, as a startup, you probably want to look at corporates or companies that have or are trying to get these systems in place. Otherwise, it's going to be very foreign. And I think the challenge startups have with this whole collaboration topic is, you probably got to know what is your own business model. How do you want to move forward, right? And then what options do you have? What corporates are out there that are willing to collaborate, and what do they offer? So in January, BMW launched a new startup collaboration program called BMW Startup Garage, right? So I got in touch with them to find out, okay, what's this all about? And there's a lot of marketing out there, and it could potentially get a lot of startups very excited. They want to attract people from the automobile sector, but not only that, it could be Internet of Things. Essentially anything that would make the driver experience better or improve technology in the car. But what is your opportunity to really collaborate with them? Well, the criteria is you have to have gone through an accelerator program, or you have to have already received significant investment, okay? So BMW wants someone else to do the validation. Okay, so let's say you've done that and you fit in. They're not going to invest any money in you. They just are going to be your first customer and maybe introduce you to the supply chain. That's potentially very good for your business.
It's going to take like 5 years, probably.
So actually they're looking for 1 year exclusivity, and then maybe your technology or whatever could be used in other automobile companies as well. But the trick to this is probably getting into the supply chain. So having BMW as a potential customer, but your real customer is going to be Bosch, right? Who is the supplier to BMW and is going to buy your product in quantity. but the customer has validated that they will buy it. So how many startups are going to be able to do that? Until the end of this year, maybe 2, because that's what they're looking for. And if that works, they might do it in Silicon Valley and in China. So again, it's that long-term thing. Is if that doesn't fit in with your growth plan for your own business, it's no good for you. So that's where I think, you have a real challenge to figure out what is available, does it fit what I want to do, and you can waste a lot of time looking into all of these things where you could just be growing your business by yourself in the meantime. So I think be very picky about what you go after.
So my guess is like if BMW is doing this for PR, startup can also join this for PR too and get some visibility, so then it will make it easier for them to pitch the suppliers directly and not wait for the BMW to introduce them.
But they'll only get visibility if they get chosen for the program.
Okay, so you still need to invest like 1 year or around this. Okay.
Yeah, and on this I just completely agree with Jan. You have to be, as a startup, to be super careful in who you're going to engage with. You need to understand the motivation behind. Why is the corporate accelerator doing this? What department is actually funding this accelerator? And then, but on the way where you should approach, this is Jan Girard from on yesterday was just mentioning dating. This is somehow a lot of dating. You have to engage early on with different corporations. So first of all, you have to be careful in a sense that, again, like the term sheet, the condition, like depending on whatever it is. Like I met 7 months ago a French entrepreneur working on a really disruptive product within an industry. And I met him again 2 weeks ago. He did like really big progress within the 7 months. And I had this discussion, and it was funny to see like how much he had to face and how many times he had to say no to a €500,000 check. Simply because if he was doing that, he would become kind of stuck to one large company and couldn't move forward and realize what he actually really wants to do. So this is kind of, as an entrepreneur, when you're in this position, you really have to be strong in a sense, because you can have a lot of money in front of you and you have to say no to it. And when you're running out of money, that's a tough choice, but that has to be made. At the end of the day, you don't want to die or to just be like quickly acquired by a company. But on your side, so because there are so many ways to collaborate, that you need to engage early on to really discuss and to really get to know, again, like the problems they have. The top 3 problems is a good one. And then also listen. Please, as a startup, listen a lot to the corporation. Too many times startups are going to top management and then speaking and speaking and speaking and speaking. And I think we mentioned it yesterday on one of the panels.
I've heard that Mike's sharing this, yeah?
And Mike shared it. It's, yeah, just please pay attention to what are their pain points and then come out with the solution that is the right fit for them and that can work for both of you. Because again, what we want to have at the end of the day, this is a win-win-win-win.
Yeah. And I just want to add to that quickly, because there's another story that this time frame is so important. Find out the time frame, because what happens inside corporates is when you think of a corporate's vision, right? Compare that to the vision of the entrepreneur. Your vision is more long-term than the corporate's vision. Because the corporate has management changing all the time. Even CEOs change. That's why I had to leave Intel. And my whole department got wiped out that I had spent a year creating value for. So what I've also seen is a corporate will acquire even 10 startups because they think, wow, these 10 startups, they fit into our portfolio and we're really going to be able to collaborate now over the next 3 years. 12 months later, what happens? The corporate, the big tanker, slightly changes direction, and that now means that 50% of the portfolio, the 5 startups, do not fit in to the new direction. But you've been acquired, so you're left hanging there, yet there's no real opportunity for you to add the original value that you wanted to add, okay? So that's why I think this dating thing comes into play. Can you set a timeline of when things are going to be delivered? Because if it's too long, they'll change their mind, they'll go on to something else, and you're left hanging up high and dry.
Okay.
Sorry.
have 2 more minutes for 2 of you to share some valuable advice to startups. So please.
I completely agree with the point presented earlier. So it's very important to listen and to know how to actively listen to the corporation. And yes, corporations are very, very slow movers. And if for a startup a iteration should take no more than, I don't know, a month and a half, maybe 3 months, for a corporation it can be an year and it's nothing for them. So when you look for a match, it has to be on so many strategic levels. It's not something you can decide from one moment to another. And these kind of innovation programs, I think they're such an amazing opportunity for startups, because before this trend appeared, it was so difficult to crack this nut. It was basically impossible to get into the corporate world and try to sell something or understand if you have a solution for a corporate. Right now, and hopefully in the future, a lot of corporations will have these open innovation programs, whatever their name will be, and it will be much more easier for B2B startups to come in and really understand from inside the problems and get a good solution out there for these corporates.
And the last word.
Just one thing, stay full, stay hungry is great, but sooner or later you will have to be serious and satisfied. So it's good for the beginning, but in the long run I would advise to not it's a good slogan, but I don't know if it's a philosophy of life.
Well, thank you guys for having this conversation, and thank you for listening, and yeah, let's stay in touch, and we can talk in a break, right?
Thank you very much, panel. Thank you very much, Oksana.